Live from the YourTV Ottawa Valley Studios on the shores of the mighty Ottawa River, this is Your Vote for the riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, hosted by Peter Emo.
Good evening and welcome to Your TV and for Your Vote. Tonight we have three panelists, well known to each of you. On my immediate left we have Michael Donoghue, who was elected in 2010 and is the mayor in 2014 of Admiston-Bromley, a longtime farmer in the community, very successful as a beef farmer as well as involved in the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. To his left we have Mayor Jennifer Murphy, a warden of the County of Renfrew, first elected in 2010, Township of Wilshire Valley, served as the vice chair of the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, or Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, now serving as a director in the Eastern Ontario Regional Network and the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council. And to her left, Mike LeMay, first elected to the City of Pembroke as mayor in 2014. Mike is a longtime education administrator with a deep respect and contribution to his community. So welcome to everybody this evening. Thank you very much for being here. And of course, we're here to talk about the election. And the candidates are John Yakubuski from the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, Cade McWilliam from the Ontario Party, Oliver Jacob, Liberals, Anna Dolan representing the Green Party, and Kurt Stahl representing the NDP, as well as Murray Reid representing the Confederation of Regions Party. And we'll get right into it. We have a couple of questions for our panelists to start off. The first question is, has the overall election been boring? What are the top three issues in this riding that you noticed? And were they highlighted or answered? And Michael, if you could start us off, please.
I don't know that the campaign has been boring. I think that the challenge is we are still only just coming out of COVID. If this is normal and this is normal adjacent, we're somewhere about here and we're trying to find the breadcrumbs. And I think in that dynamic, and don't forget too that we had the devastation damages right across the province of Ontario, the central part of the province in the last 2 weeks of the campaign period. I think it would be a challenge for anyone, for any of the parties, for any of the leaders to have really excited the electorate in this election. But I would certainly concur that it probably is the lowest energy, lowest level of excitement of probably any election since I have had the vote.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer, and our top three issues as well?
Well, I think that the top three issues, obviously, housing has been all over the news. Post-pandemic recovery has been very important. The whole notion that we're going to go back into lockdown, and so that I tend to agree with Michael that this hasn't been a very exciting election. But there have been some things that people have really taken off with. And I know highways have been at the top of their non-priority lists. So it's been interesting, but I agree, it's been sort of low-key.
And Mike, your observations, you've sat through a number of elections over the years?
I found that's just been mentioned that it has been really low-key, and I mean really low-key. The only candidate really that I met is our present MPP. I have not met the other candidates. I've read some comments, but communication I found has been really iffy. You were picking it up on social media, or you were able to pick it up on the news broadcast from Coachco, for instance, and of course our local newspaper. But I found there was no real issue that stood out where each one of the parties could have really hammered the other party. But I found the issues like in our area, well, healthcare, and definitely VTAC's an example of that. And I found in the city of Pembroke, the one thing, especially due to COVID, but recently the cost of living has gotten totally out of hand. And where we tend to notice it here, for instance, is the use of the grind, where people they're at the stage now. What do I pay for? I have to feed my family, I have to pay, and so on. And I found generally they were all addressed by all the parties. So there are several issues, but I found it was very low key, so there's nothing really that really stood out as far as I'm concerned.
And I'm a little surprised. I thought broadband, given that we just came out of the
Yeah.
pandemic and everybody's working from home and kids were studying, and so it wasn't uncommon to have someone sitting at the dining room table, someone sitting downstairs in one of the rooms, someone in a bedroom, and someone maybe out on the back porch trying to work and grumbling about the neighbors running through Netflix and messing up your reception. So I'm a little surprised, but I think in the pre-election 3 months and the election prior to the writ seemed to have lasted, the campaign seems to be 6 months old by now, but there was a lot of money tossed around both federally and provincially, and now with various programs being rolled out. So I guess that probably was the reason that we didn't hear much about broadband.
I think, if I might too, I think that the elephant in the room, and I think back to the American election of 1992, and one of the buzzwords, the slogans that came out of it's the economy, stupid. And this, I think, has a lot of the oxygen has been taken up, as you had alluded to, Mike, inflation that we are seeing, fuel prices, food prices. People are really feeling pocketbook issues. When people feel pocketbook issues, that pushes a lot of other issues to the margin. On top of that, what I would suggest, and it's still the economy, and maybe the first, second, and third issues in my mind are the economy, housing.
Yeah.
Young people now are enormously challenged when the starter homes are beyond their means. This is an enormous challenge for that generation that is just embarking on setting up the rest of their lives. So they're being terribly constrained right now, and this truly is impinging on budgets because people are now having to decide where they have to cut back.
Absolutely. And to jump off also what Mike was saying, not only did I not see the candidates out and about, except for John Yakubuski, we got no literature, and I found it highly disappointing that not one of the party leaders set foot in the county of Renfrew. I think that there was a missed opportunity when they were campaigning in Ottawa to take a drive up 17 and come to the county.
Especially given the wind damage in Greater Madawaska, Calabogie,
Exactly.
Centennial Lake, and that is reasonably close to Ottawa. So you're right; they could have dropped in. Now, Michael, you mentioned gas prices. So gas prices are an issue for us because we're filling our vehicles.
Yeah.
But gas prices, I was reading today, Alberta, they're expected to run a surplus of about $15 billion this year because of the increase in royalty fees, and so it's bad for us but good for them.
Right.
Another quick question. We've all made presentations to ministers over our careers. We've all made presentations, and we've been introduced by John. And just a brief, if you wouldn't mind, a couple of brief points about what it's like to work with John. And is it different now when you make a presentation that John is a member of the government as opposed to when he was a member of opposition? And Michael, please.
What I have found is that John has been very accessible from a municipal perspective. It's important to keep in mind, and it has always been my impression of John, that John understands the distinction of when politics begins and ends and where governance begins and ends. And the nuts and bolts simply of administering the province, and in particular this portion of it, and even in more particular, Admaston Bromley, where I am the head of council, John has been eminently accessible. It probably is a template actually for members of the provincial parliament, because so much of, in fact, the direct relationship that we have as municipalities being so-called creatures or creations of the municipality or of the province, so much of what we do is predicated on provincial aims and goals. So certainly it has been very beneficial to have an engaged member that is certainly attuned to the needs of our community.
I couldn't agree with, I couldn't agree with Michael more. John is so accessible, and I think that, yes, being in government has definitely helped our riding, because he's in government. But I would say that even when he wasn't, when the Liberals were in power, John was extremely good at crossing the aisle and saying to whatever Liberal minister was there, these are the needs of the county of Renfrew. And so I think that absolutely it's great, and he sits in on our delegations, but I think that he was very effective even before he was in government.
Yeah. And Mike, please.
No, I agree with Jennifer. I met John when I was on with the previous government with the Champlain Local Health Integration, when we ended up having to speak to all the MPPs within the province. And that's when I really got to know John and very well. And of course, when I ran for mayor in 2014, I had not been involved in politics. And so I felt comfortable going to John, and as Jennifer said, he was of tremendous help. And basically that's why I've said he's been a mentor. And also at that time, what I should mention is when I first became mayor, Peter was warden of the day. And I can remember attending some sessions, and Peter was able to put me at ease, because just to bring readings, I used to have a sheet of paper. And so I learned. So I found John was exactly the same way with the Liberal government. And I find now, being in government, it is a tremendous help, but he always has been that way. Very, very accessible, and connecting those dots that you needed as a representative of the municipality when you were going to Toronto.
Yeah, my experiences with John, and I have a contrast because I also had experiences with Randy Hillier. When John was in our delegations prior to being in government, if you had an hour with a minister, John was very good about being able to use that hour, and you ended up with about an hour 15 because he was joking with them and chatting with them and teasing them. And if the conversation lagged a little bit, he could fill it in with a homeism about what's going on around the Ottawa Valley or somebody he knows, and just to roll you through while you're turning the page on your presentation. And I've also found that he's done that as well with as a member of the government. It's not quite as folksy, but it's just as effective. And I represented Lanark County at one point. One of the mayors next door asked me to step in and had a delegation with Randy Hillier. And Randy was in opposition, still a PC. We were supposed to have an hour, we had 45 minutes because of Hillier's style, if you could call it that. So I think I grew really to appreciate John and his ability to reach across the aisle, as you say, and do things. So it was always very important. And I think we have some results in right now. And what we have right now is John is leading with 218 votes. Kurt Stoll has 168, Oliver Jacobs 73, Anna Dolan is 32 votes, and Thomas O'Connor from the New Blue Party has 26 votes, and that's 9% of the polls reporting in Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke at this time. And with that, I think we'll move along. So I don't think there's any surprises there. It'd be awfully curious to see what polls they are. They're probably pretty small polls. We have a lot of small polls in the county. So we'll just move to another question. The overall race, I guess one of the questions, are the Liberals going to get enough seats to form a party, which is 11? And are the Greens going to get any other seats up from 1? I think their leader is going to be pretty solid, Mike Schreiner. He's a very solid performer, very engaging, so I don't think his seat's at risk. But Michael?
So as to the first question, that's probably the largest gamble to predict, particularly as the campaign seemed to play out in the waning days. It does not seem to be a particularly high bar, 11 seats, though it's almost 50% above what the Liberals held at dissolution. As far as, I do believe that they will get there. As far as the Green Party, I think that that's a fascinating dynamic tonight. There are two ridings in particular that I'm kind of keeping a close watch on. London North Centre, I think, is hotly contested. The other one Everyone here assembled, given our experience in municipalities, are very familiar with Graydon Smith, the long-serving mayor of Bracebridge, the just past president of the Association of Municipalities Ontario that is running in the seat that was vacated by Norm Miller, who served over 20 years, I think, in Parry Sound, Muskoka. So there is no incumbent, if you will, in Parry Sound, Muskoka. We also have probably the most fractured right or conservative dynamic in the province this year, with the Ontario Party and with the New Blue Party. There not being an incumbent. And then the other dynamic that is particularly fascinating in Parry Sound, Muskoka, of course, is that the Liberal candidate was forced to recuse, to vacate the nomination. So there is no Liberal running in Parry Sound, Muskoka. Now, I didn't have an opportunity to look up what the results were from the last election in 2018, but I suspect that is an incredible dynamic on both the fractured right and now the removal of a pretty significant Liberal.
Yeah, and the Green Party candidate had ran twice before, and
Yeah.
so he's really built up a following. He's also I think he's a current school teacher as well, so he would have some of that natural name recognition. Right. Jennifer?
So both of your questions were things that Michael and I discussed on the drive up here. See, we're being fiscally responsible and using only Michael's gas, not mine, because he has farmer money.
Oh, farmer money.
No, but we had this exact discussion on the way here. Certainly, it will be very interesting to see if the Liberals get their party status back. And we were also talking about, will the NDP once again be in opposition? So, we just talked about that this election hasn't been all that exciting, but there are a couple of facets of it that will be interesting at the end of this night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think tomorrow morning when Breakfast TV strikes out across the province, it's going to be interesting to watch as people start tearing apart tonight's results.
Because we're nice pundits,
Yeah.
right? They might not be that nice in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. And Mike?
No, I would say yes for the Liberals as well, because when you looked at their platform, we know last time why they really got probably deservedly so. But this time when you look at the platforms of the parties, I think again they're back in that middle. I understand fully that the province, we are fractured, with both extremes. So I think when we're talking about 11 seats, I'm pretty sure they'll have their status back, especially when you read some of the polls and they say that a majority of government's going to be formed with only 37% of the population. So I'm pretty sure the Liberals will regain their status.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting too, because I think I heard something about 1 million people, 9.9% of the voting population voted in the advanced polls. So and I think most parties are sophisticated enough now, of the three anyway, and probably the Greens, to be able to track who voted. So I think they have a pretty broad idea right now of where they're going to end up and what their range is. So it'll be pretty interesting to see it at the end of the night and in the morning.
Yeah, because some of these poll numbers won't be coming in until, some of the ridings
Sure.
won't be reporting until, it sounds like possibly midnight.
Well, especially up in some of the northern reaches, because they might not have as reliable broadband as the rest of us. So there might be a lot of paper copies being counted, but it won't be like 10 million paper votes as it would have been 10 years ago. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. And again, another quick question, one I think we've all pondered, but John's future, because it looks like, with the early numbers, but I think based on experience that John's going to get reelected.
I would say so if we're looking at the numbers now.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, does John get a cabinet seat? And what seat would best suit John, or are we at a real decided advantage if he remains as the parliamentary assistant to the Premier? So, Michael?
I'm going to be very self-centered from a municipal perspective here. The challenge, regardless, for any riding is as accessible as John is, as capable as his office has been. he simply is not going to be accessible as a minister. However, I think John brings to the table a considerable talent and skill to the role. From my perspective, again, from a purely selfish standpoint, I think that it was critical that John was on the Treasury Board. The Treasury Board, if such a thing exists, is kind of that agenda-setting part of the government, of any sitting government. And I think it was critical that John was partaking or participant in the Treasury Board. Certainly, I think that John found his legs within the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, which of course is so incredibly important here in the Ottawa Valley. There is just it is almost a genetic disposition, I think, that John would have, is that feel for that particular ministry. So I know that John is certainly capable, and it is not my intention to hope that he would not accede to a minister position again, but I think from a purely perspective of my municipality, he's probably less accessible, as you would imagine.
But I think back to the floods of 2019, and I was the warden that year, and it was such devastation, and it was certainly helpful that our MPP was also the Minister of Natural Resources. So that was, that when I think about that time, but I do agree with you. I think being on the Treasury Board is paramount, but ministerial seat, I'm not sure what even Yak is thinking, where he would like to land in the cabinet. Because he's had a couple of portfolios, but yeah.
Okay, and Mike, please.
Oh, definitely. John deserves a ministry, and the one I looked at was environment, conservation, and parks. He's had natural resources. He's been the Premier's assistant. There's Treasury, but there are portfolios where he would do an excellent job. And I found him accessible while he was a minister. Granted, maybe it took 12 hours for him to get to you, instead of 15 or 20 minutes. But I found him very accessible while he was minister as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the ministries that might really be a good fit, because John is by nature gregarious and a seller, would be tourism. Tourism and recreation.
Yes.
That would be something, because he's been to every corner of the province and has an experience in each one of them. So I think that's one that if I had a deciding vote.
That's funny. I never even thought
would
of.
be the one I think he'd really
Yeah.
fit into nicely. And right now, very quickly, we're going to give you some results as we have them, and then we'll take a break. So right now we have John Yakubuski leading at 6,082. Kurt Stoll from the NDP at 2149. Oliver Jacob at 1178 for the Liberals. Thomas O'Connor for the New Blue Party at 524, and Anna Dolan of the Green Party at 402. And so we'll take a break now, and you can go back to Your Vote on Your TV. Welcome back to Your Vote on Your TV this evening. And our three panelists are still with us, and we are ready to tell you that we believe John Yakubuski has been successfully re-elected to represent Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke and for another 4 years. And as you heard before we went to the break, we were talking about potentially John getting cabinet seats. So we're hoping that Premier Ford has a couple of minutes to listen to us and tap John on the shoulder. And we're hearing from other sources that it's likely a PC majority government, and now I think it's a matter of waiting to see. And some of the other questions are going to lead to this: the future of some of the leaders and how many seats. And so, with that, your observations about tonight on election night. How is it playing out in Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke? Was this expected for you that John would be leading his nearest opponent by a 3-1 margin?
I have to say of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, though, of course, it's been through iterations in the time that I have had the franchise, but we are nothing if not loyal.
Yes.
I've only had, in the time that I have been casting ballots, there's been 2 federal members and 2 provincial members. Long-time provincial member Sean Conway, I think 25 years. John has completed 19.
Yep.
If this is a majority, he will have 23 in by the time. On a federal level, I think Len Hopkins had 25 years, and at this point, Cheryl Gallant now has 22 years under her belt.
John's dad, Paul?
Paul was
21, 22?
More than that as well, yeah, and I don't know precisely. Again, because the ridings have shifted and there has been reapportionment of ridings and realignment, et cetera, it's not exactly so, but so it is not a surprise at all, because generally speaking here, not generally speaking, it has been my complete experience that the only time that we have a new member is when the person holding the office is no longer seeking that office.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
Jennifer?
it is true. Oh, and we've got the check mark up there for Yak.
Yes, we do.
Very nice, very nice. And no, I don't think that there's any surprise here. I know that we only have 31% of the polls in, but it'll be interesting to see where we land at the end of this evening. I did just text Yak, congratulations.
And Mike, and part of what we were talking about off camera when we were at break was the NDP's placement in this race. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I know it's from looking at the results. The NDP, you can tell they worked hard during the federal election and as well as this one. I'm not surprised that John's been an excellent MPP, both in opposition and in government. And to me, that's what's important, the role they play in both. And John has done that extremely well. And it'll be very interesting to see provincially what the majority is. Is it as high as the last election? Is it lower? So I'm waiting for those results. But I'm very pleased that John's our MPP.
Yeah, I think it's good for our community that John's been reelected, which we expected. And again, to your point, Mike, John's been able to reach out, whether you're an NDP supporter or a Liberal or something else. You can go to John's office and get, or meet him at the fair, talk to him, and get the same as if you're a longtime supporter that has put $100 in every year. So, to his credit, he's been able to do that very well.
Well, and Peter, earlier we were talking about the Liberals, and I see on the screen here they're already at 10, so they just need one more seat to get their party status back.
Exactly. And who was it made that nasty comment? They called them the minivan party just after the last election.
Yes.
I can't remember who it was, but it was cruel but funny.
It's not very nice, no.
No. Another question. I think everybody, as soon as you have a second term, when does Premier Ford walk the plank? Does he serve out his term? Does he leave halfway through his term? Any rumblings that anybody's aware of, Michael?
I'm not aware of any. I think, quite frankly, I would be astonished if Mr. Ford did not complete what certainly appears now to be returning as a majority government. There is, certainly a great deal of power and authority that resides in a majority government to really advance their agenda. One of the things certainly that I think sometimes bedevils majorities, and at this point it's difficult to say if it will be the same size majority as at dissolution, but I know certainly comparing it to the agricultural community, the second worst thing after having no rain is having too much rain, and I think sometimes one would probably wish that the majority does not become too large in order to make sure that all the needs are being met of the various parts of the province. So I don't think there's any question in my mind that Premier Ford, what seems to be returning as Premier Ford, would certainly serve out the majority term.
And thank you. Jennifer?
I agree, and I think that, much like all of us, we sort of lost 2 years of our terms due to COVID, and I think that there were probably things that he and his party wanted to do that didn't get done through no fault of their own. Apparently, I do not have sound, I'm being told, and Steve Del Duca did not win his seat.
Okay.
So that's I'm getting intel.
All right. And Mike, your thoughts, please.
I'm sure Premier Ford will serve out the term. He has a majority government. Now the onus is on us as municipal representatives to make sure, that the promises that they've made, and also the one thing I keep going back to is AMO's 8 points from a municipality point of view, and looking at the 8 points, looking at the way the Ford government operated in their first term, I think he'll serve out the term, and I think they'll be prepared to listen to, to people who would like to see some changes.
Okay. And just, I guess now that we have heard that Mr. Del Duca likely hasn't won his seat, does anybody spring to mind as a possible replacement for him? Because I can't imagine that they would let him sit 4 years outside of the legislature, and I'm not sure they have enough solid seats that are guarantees that someone could resign and he could take their place. So it probably looks like, in the cold breath of air tomorrow morning, that he'll be moving on. Anybody spring to mind who might replace him?
I'm a fan of Mitzi Hunter. So I was surprised that she didn't actually become the leader.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah.
Now it really will shake up the party, so it'll be quite interesting to see how they move forward.
Yeah, and it might be a generational thing too.
Yes, it could be.
In terms of, he is probably one of the last remaining members of the Wynne government.
Yes.
A substantial member of that. And I have to admit, I have some fond memories of him. He came here and we took him through Highway 17.
Mm-hmm.
Was that when you were the warden?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. By amazing coincidence.
Sorry.
But a lot of people that started,
Inside joke.
a lot of people that started had started that effort long before I got to the chair. And but to his credit, he drove around with John and I in the truck, and it was a great conversation. And he was enthusiastic about it. So I have a bit of sympathy for him, because I think he's a lot to offer, and I hope he has some other successes he can turn to. But anyway, Michael, your thoughts?
Well, even though there did not seem to be, and I probably should restate, this was not a critique actually of at a provincial level or even at the riding levels. I think certainly whether I shook hands with each of the candidates or not was not of a particular challenge for me. I think that they were out there in the community. Certainly I was seeing them in the local press. I think that the community had somewhat of a resistance to engaging on that, and I think that was perhaps the subplots in this election were more fascinating than the actual provincial election. I think that the polls have been indicating where we have landed for several days now. But on the Vaughan Woodbridge, which is where Stephen Del Duca held the riding until 2018, at which point Michael Tobolo defeated Mr. Del Duca. So I think that, as you had pointed out, Peter, there were a couple of challenges for Del Duca, both at the provincial level but also at his riding level. I think that there needed to be a groundswell of excitement, and I don't think that was met. The other thing is, I think, and I don't think this is germane only to Ontario, I think it could be said of our federal politics as well, and probably all of the provinces, I think we rarely elect governments. I think we always defeat governments. And if you go back to 2018, as Mike, you have noted, I think there was a significant rejection of the Liberals who had been in power for quite some time. There was certainly the connection between Stephen Del Duca and Kathleen Wynne. In my estimation, I think that the vitriol aimed at Kathleen Wynne was overwrought. I think that there were a lot of fantastic things that the Wynne government did for Ontario. Hydro was certainly a millstone. And I think that Stephen Del Duca still had that connection and has not been able to distance himself enough. So I think that perhaps played a lesser role on the provincial stage, but the subplot of which is, if he were to have won his riding, I think he was safe as leader because it appears that they may return to official party status. So it is unfortunate that he is not going to be there, but as you have said, the party will not continue to have a non-sitting member as a leader. It is going to be drawn from whatever cadre, or perhaps from an outside person. Unfortunate for them is it takes so much energy and treasure just to go through a leadership again.
Exactly. And as we head to break, we see that the PCs are elected and leading in 74 seats, the NDP in 28, and the Liberals projected at 10, an independent at 1, and 1 Green Party member. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. With that, we'll head to break, and we'll ask you to join us again in a few minutes. Thank you. Welcome back to Your TV, Your Vote. And we have our three panelists still with us right now. We are going to give you a real quick rundown on the results. John Yakubuski has 18,217 votes. Kurt Stoll of the NDP, 5,234. Oliver Jacob of the Liberals, 3,028. Thomas O'Connor, 1,283. And Anna Dolan from the Green Party, 1,053, and that's with 60% of our polls reporting. So John is leading by approximately 8,000 votes over his opponents. So another quick question, Andrea Horvath. This is her, I believe, her fourth election. Hasn't broken through the barrier, and that's a long time in politics to follow behind one leader. Who, you know, I think the only one that's probably been as successful of holding off the hordes behind them has been either John Diefenbaker or Ed Broadbent. But Michael, what your thoughts on Andrea Horvath?
Well, certainly hats off to Andrea Horvath. She's only the third female to be the leader of one of the major parties. Of course, Lynn McLeod and Kathleen Wynne being the other two. And I think that certainly the NDP have presented themselves as a strong contender in numerous ridings. We're seeing that even here in Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Substantial polling for the NDP. The challenge for Andrea Horvath is that certainly appears at this point that they are going to return as the official opposition. However, they're going to see their seat count diminish. I think at dissolution it might have been 38 seats. Right now, I think the last we saw was projected on 20 or leading in declared or leading in 2027 now. So I think it will be a challenge because the bar had been established at a new level in 2018. I think it probably will be a challenge for Andrea Horvath to continue as leader of the NDP, but with a view towards using the success heretofore as the springboard to elevate and return. It's been a long, long time since Bob Rae.
Exactly. And
Well,
Jennifer, please.
Well, we just had, our producers just had up the numbers from Andrea Horvath's riding, and at this time it wasn't looking very good. It seemed that the New Blue, I believe, or the Ontario Party perhaps, were in quite a bit of a lead. So that'll be an interesting race to watch as the evening progresses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mike?
I think we'll see Andrea Horvath probably retire. She's been at it for a long time, has done a great job. The party is the official opposition at this stage, and looking at moving up again, they will be probably looking at new leadership.
Oh,
So yeah, our numbers.
there we go.
They're a little slow coming out of Hamilton right
Hamilton
now.
was not correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and of course, we're all municipal politicians, and always on the ball in terms of what are our issues. You're going to AMO in August, and you're requesting delegations. What would be the three items each of you would make a presentation on in three separate delegations? Michael?
Well, I kind of have the cheat sheet for this one. As chair of the Health Committee at the County of Renfrew, there are two delegation requests being advanced.
That's true.
Both with the Minister of Health. One is with respect to public health. The other is VTAC, which is virtual Renfrew County VTAC, Renfrew County Virtual Triage and Assessment Center. So on the first one, public health, we are slowly having to pick up the thread of where we left off in March of 2020, that there had been substantial change made to the funding formula for public health. I think that the pandemic itself has demonstrated that was unwarranted and is problematic. So that continues to be a pressure point, substantial downloading of public health funding to the obligated municipalities, and in our case, City of Pembroke, County of Renfrew, and Township of South Algonquin and Nipissing. The second one on VTAC, of course, this has demonstrated a locally conceived and developed response to a substantial need in our community. as we are either at or approaching 25% of our population without access to primary health care, this is an enormous problem. This is the means to address that. I think we are only just scratching the surface of what virtual can do. It is not to replace in-person, but to augment, and absolutely this needs to be made permanent.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Agreed. Well, Michael stole all the good answers, but yes, I think from
OMPF, OSIF,
right, joint and several liability,
there you go.
all the catchwords.
Yeah.
The one and Michael DeBolo has been amazing with our little grassroots committee on mental health and addiction. So certainly, I think that knowing the challenges coming out of COVID, especially the opioid crisis and the breadth of ages having mental health crisis, that would be my number one priority. But yes, I agree with Michael, it's sort of all things health. And I apologize to the viewers. Yes, Andrea Horvath is doing very, very, very well in her riding with, she's at what, 56.4%? So that's great. Sorry that Hamilton was wrong.
Yeah. And Mike.
Well, as a separated city and partners with the county in regards to health, I'm really pleased because we are with you 100%, going before the Ministry of Health. But as a separated city, we hope to have two delegations. One, of course, is infrastructure. The city of Pembroke, because of its age and because of the infrastructure and because of our size, it is so important that we receive, the grants from the province. Otherwise, we just can't exist. And of course, the other one will be in regards to our aquatic center. Of course, Renfrew benefited last term, so we will keep pushing, and hopefully there will be funding available again for recreation capital.
Good. And very quickly, tomorrow morning you wake up, and if you have to name a Minister of Finance or a Minister of Health, because we know that Christine Elliott has retired, any preferences for a Minister of Health? Michael?
It's a bit of a challenge. Certainly, I know, and she is a physician, Dr. Marilee Fullerton, who was the Minister of Long-Term Care and certainly worked, and the neighboring riding to Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke to the east as well. And I know Dr. Fullerton was an outstanding advocate on behalf of long-term care and what we were doing here in the county of Renfrew, and certainly was enormously enamored of the VTAC as well. So I think that would perhaps be a prime candidate for our purposes.
Jennifer, very quickly.
This is much like following Yak when you're speaking at something. I don't want to follow Michael anymore because, yes, Marilee Fullerton, absolutely, she is a physician. I think she'd make an excellent Minister of Health. I think, Peter Bethlen-Falvey for Minister of Finance.
Okay. And Mike, please.
No, I'm going to let Premier Ford make that decision. I'm not prepared to start naming people for positions in the ministry.
That's right. We're now picking the cabinet.
What the heck? See, that's Mike's major fault. He's basically a nice guy.
That's right.
He's very tough to dislike. Well, we're getting very close to ending this evening, and I'd like to thank you. And Mike has announced he's not running again, and that's a real loss. I know as Jennifer and I have both been wardens, and Michael as chair of health, we've had to work with Mike for these years, and it's been very easy. The number of times when we've called or had a conversation, or you and I had lunch on occasion, just to chat about things. And one of the things people don't realize, I think, is the importance of the two, the county and the city working together. But part of it was also Mike was a member of the Mayor's Caucus. Jennifer and I are a member of the Warden's Caucus, and we really managed to get some traction between the two groups and move things forward on a regular basis. And so thank you for that, Mike. Really going to miss you and what you've done for us and with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jennifer, of course, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy our conversations at any number of occasions, and we have a lot of them.
Yes, we do.
And Michael and I serve with Jennifer on any number of committees and boards, so we're all very familiar with each other. And Michael, I really appreciate your insights. And Michael is a very avid spelunker, and he digs out data and minutes and reads things. And It's quite a challenge to keep up with him, but we're very fortunate that he's here to help us on a regular basis. So thank you, Michael.
Well, and I do sport that miner's cap while I am spelunking about on the internet
Yes.
as well, and very fashionable. If I might too, Peter, I just, and I'll keep it to the Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, enormous gratitude to all of the candidates, John Yakubowski, Kurt Stoll, Oliver Jacob, Thomas O'Connor, Anna Dolan, Cade McWilliams, and perennial, perhaps, Murray Reid. It takes an enormous amount of effort to put your name forward, and also certainly it is very satisfying for John tonight, but of course it's got to be disappointing for all of the other candidates, and that is something that you face in electoral politics at all times. So enormous gratitude to all of those, in particular though to Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, that have put themselves forward.
Yes, thank you. And all the volunteers that worked with them, and then also the people at the polls really working hard to count the votes and get people through. And of course to our viewers, thank you very much for taking the time and your interest in our community. And the folks behind the camera, thank you very much for everything, and wish the candidates well in the future. Thank you very much for joining us.